Jewish Insights with Justin Pines on JBS is made possible in part by the clubs at Pearl River, New York, luxury rental communities for ages 55 and better, now leasing Phase 3 at the Reserve, and the B.L. Manger Foundation.
Shalom and welcome to Jewish Insights. This week, we're embarking on a journey across the centuries with one of the most insightful and dynamic Jewish historians of our time, Rabbi Ken Spiro, senior lecturer and researcher for Aish Torah in Jerusalem. Rabbi Spiro is also the author of several books, including my favorite, Crash Course in Jewish History from Abraham to Modern Israel. I remember where I was and when I read this and how powerfully it impacted me at the time. And he is one of the most sought-after licensed tour guides in Israel. We're going to explore the remarkable saga of the Jewish people from the heights of King David's united monarchy through the devastation of the temple's destruction, across millennia of exile, dispersion, and resilience, all the way to the cusp of modern Jewish rebirth at the end of the 19th century. What really happened after the temple fell? How did the Jews survive empires, crusades, and expulsions? What threads kept us connected as a people and as a faith through the centuries of exile? And perhaps most importantly, what can this long arc of history teach us today as Jews striving to live with purpose, memory, and hope? Join me now as we dive into Jewish history, not as dusty facts, but as a living legacy with Rabbi Ken Spiro. Rabbi Spiro, welcome back. I know you've been on JBS several times with Rabbi Golub and various lectures as well. We're just so happy to have you back in the studio.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so we discussed in advance, we're going to try to do a tour de force here together. I'm going to try to learn with you. My working assumption is that the average person watching this has some sense of the, Adam and Eve, let's call it, Abraham and Sarah, up until, let's say Moses arrives, or doesn't arrive, but is on the edge of the Holy Land. And maybe a little bit after that, they probably heard of King David, and everyone knows World War II and the Holocaust. But there's kind of this massive black hole in between, and the state of Israel. And there's this hole in between that really no one has, the average person is not so familiar with. I'd love for you to, let's try to do it together. Before, we'll do like a previously. Previously, give us the very short version, just catch us up, because I think people don't know who was during the Bronze Age, that kind of thing. Give us a little bit of a catch up, and then we'll really start from King David and the creation of the temple with his son Solomon.
Sure. Okay. Nothing like trying to do
we got
a
it.
lot. 4,000 years of history
in an hour. We got it.
Yeah, in an hour.
I think it'll be fun.
Exactly. So you're right about, by the way, first of all, that Jewish history is the big black hole for not just Jews who don't have a great Jewish education. I have found that Jews who spend their whole life learning, like in yeshivot, in a yeshiva, a school of higher Jewish learning, shockingly don't know Jewish history and haven't read anything past basically the book of Deuteronomy, which is what we all seem to know because that's the yearly cycle we read, and those are the Bible stories that everyone's familiar with. But once we get to Joshua, Judges, Samuel, Kings, which is Jewish history in Israel, you're right, it's a black hole for most Jews, which is sad because we have a very long history. I mean, I would say preface that by first saying most people don't appreciate that being Jewish is not just a religion. We're also a people. We have a land, a language, and a history. And we have one of the oldest histories on the planet Earth. So that's the beginning spot. And where does it begin? You mentioned Bronze period. In the ancient Near East, we basically date periods by the metal technology that was used. Copper, bronze, iron. Now we have the aluminum period. I don't know what it's called now. But Abraham, the progenitor of the Jewish people, appears in what's basically the Middle Bronze period, which is about 3,700 years ago. I'm going to round off.
Great.
It's easy to remember that. And he comes, and he begins in what is a place called Ur Kasdim, which is today Iraq. We're all originally Iraqis. Some of us have lost our melanin from living in Northern Europe for too long, but we're all Middle Eastern, which, by the way, is genetically demonstrable. Wow. That whether you're a dark-skinned Jew from North Africa or a very light-skinned Jew like you are, we all have the same haplotype. But Abraham migrates out of Iraq through Turkey, and Jewish history begins in the third Torah portion in the book of Genesis, which is called Lech Lecha, when God tells him to enter what is then Canaan, which is the pre-Israel name for Israel. And he migrates down there, We have several generations, which we're all familiar with because it's the book of Genesis, the story of the Jews going from the personal belief system of a couple called Abraham and Sarah to Abraham's child Isaac, to their child Jacob. Jacob has 12 sons. And then we have the story of Joseph. We go down to Egypt. This is taking place over several centuries. We spend what is about 210 years in Egypt, half of which is divided into the period of time when things are good. And then it goes south really quickly to slavery, which, by the way, is the great paradigm, the model for Jewish history. It's a very interesting pattern. The more comfortable we get, the higher we rise, the harder we fall. Because the bigger the smack we have to get us out of the place. If it's too comfortable, we seem to stay forever. It's one of the supernatural aspects of Judaism and Jewish history, and one of the patterns we have to pay attention to, because King Solomon said there's nothing new under the sun. The things we see happening in the book of Genesis and later are all repeated throughout Jewish history, which is why it's so important, not just to study the Bible, but to learn the history. So we leave Egypt. Everyone knows that story because that's the most kept of all Jewish holidays is Passover, the Exodus narrative, with Moses as our leader. We wander in the desert for 40 years because none of the men would ask for directions. No, it's because we misbehave. Moses dies. That's the end of the book of Deuteronomy. It's his closing speech to the Jewish people. And that's where most Jews, their knowledge of the history ends. In diaspora, the word is galut. So Zionism hasn't started yet. And we have to appreciate, as a side point, that Israel, God doesn't take us out of Egypt to just give us a passport, a credit card, and an airline ticket and say, go have fun. Israel is not just a destination, it's a destiny. It's the unique soil that the Jewish people can be planted in to grow and fulfill its destiny as this unique nation, which is this nation that's a light to nations, which is the whole plot of Jewish history, is that we're chosen for unique responsibility, beginning with Abraham, to connect the world to one God and to teach the world the values and the morality that come from the relationship with one God, which is the most impactful idea in all of human history. But we enter the land of Israel, and that's the book of Joshua. This begins the middle books of the Bible. We have the 5 books that are called the Chumash. The word in Hebrew is Tanakh for the entire Hebrew Bible. You know, the Christian Bible contains the entire Hebrew Bible and some other books, and then so the Tanakh there's 5 books of the Chumash that we read every year, and then we have the Nevi'im, 8 books of the prophets, beginning with Joshua, who's the leader after Moses, where we spend 7 years conquering and 7 years settling the land of Israel. It's divided up by tribes. It's a loose confederation of tribal states. Remember, Jacob has 12 sons. The 12 sons become 12 tribes. They get a specific geographic area. It's like giving a father with 50 sons, he gives them each a state.
Sure.
You know, there could be a lot of fighting over New York and California. I don't know who's going to want the Midwest as much. But there's no real strong central authority. It's a court system. Joshua is kind of the political leader. It's very similar to the way America ran in the early years. No big central government with lots of taxes and a big budget like we have today. We then go from Joshua to a period of time called Judges, which is almost 400 years. Huge period of time when, again, it says in the book of Judges, there was no king in Israel, and everyone did that which was right in their eyes. Masha Yashar Beinav, which kind of sounds like anarchy, but the Jewish view is no, people took responsibility. That's the Jewish ideal.
Oh, interesting.
Is the more personal autonomy, the more responsibility you take, the greater the decisions you make, the greater human being you are. And that's a very roller coaster period of time, because we see that just having a relationship with an invisible God is not easy. Anyone who prays in a synagogue gets exactly what we're talking about here. So we stray, and the basic contractual agreement we have throughout all of Judaism, and certainly stated more than any other idea in the Bible probably, is that at Mount Sinai, which is a holiday we're going to commemorate, the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai when we left Egypt, the holiday of Shavuot, at Mount Sinai, God basically gives us the rule book, the 613 commandments, the oral law as it's called, and it's a contractual agreement. You keep your side of the bargain, meaning follow these rules, be good to each other and to me, which is a huge point. You can't just do one without the other.
Sure.
That's the Jewish world today. Half of it is obsessed with this one, man and God, and half is obsessed with human beings with each other. Keep a balanced relationship this way and that way, and you'll be fine. You'll stay in the land. The crops will grow, the rain will fall, everything's going to be great. And your enemies will not attack you. They'll even follow you because you're supposed to be a role model for them. But the book of Judges is all about us not listening, When things are good, people only pray, when things are bad. The expression, there's no atheist in the foxholes.
Sure.
So things are good, we forget about God. We pray really hard when the things really hit the fan, so to speak. So we go down, we cry out to God, a judge comes along. Like 16 of these guys come along. Some of them in the book of Judges barely speaks about them. Some of them will go like Samson. We all know about Samson, one of the few Jewish superheroes, physically strong. And Deborah, if the best man for the job is a woman, she gets the job. But it's this roller coaster ride. It's this roller coaster ride of judge coming along. We do tshuva. We come back to our relationship with God. We fix it. We go up. We go down. We go up and down. And after almost 400 years of that, the Jewish people say, this is too hard. It's very hard to take responsibility for yourself.
Sure.
Part of every human being wants someone to tell them what to do. I'll abrogate a lot of my freedom. Just take care of all the stuff for me. Take responsibility for my life. So after almost 400 years, the Jewish people go to Samuel, who's one of the judges, one of the greatest of all the judges, and they say, give us a king, like everyone else. And the first king that's chosen is Saul, Saul from the tribe of Benjamin. And he rules for actually a very short time. He doesn't have what it takes. The hardest job in the world is not being president of the United States. It's being king of the Jewish people, because we are an incredibly individualistic, free-thinking, fractious people. It's easier to be the emperor of 1 billion Chinese than the mayor of a town of 100 Jews. And I'm not saying anything negative about Chinese people. The Bible, the rabbis call Jews stiff-necked. It says that's what God calls the Jewish people. We're very stubborn. A trait we need to outlast all the empires and transform the world, but it makes us very hard to unite. So Saul lasts for a short period of time.
Wait, pause. I want to capture a couple things here and your third comment as well. So a couple things I want to pull out is, first, I heard you say that the mission of the Jewish people, started by Abraham and Sarah, is this idea of kind of bringing monotheism to the world. And then I heard you, a second thing you said was that like our contract within that is we follow both, let's call it the vertical laws between us and the divine, and the horizontal laws between us and, let's say, the rest of the Jewish people or the world, whatever it is. And to the extent we keep that, God is on our side. To the extent that we don't, we lose that. And that there are these moments, Egypt being one of them, where we have massive dips down. We have massive dips up where things are going well, but then we lose sight of either the vertical or the horizontal, or perhaps both. And then we find a reason to, then it goes back down, and then we have an opportunity to come back. And then the last thing I heard you saying, again, I'm interpreting the themes that are coming out of this, was this idea of that we need to be a stiff-necked people in order to be successful. Just break that down for me for a second. Why?
Yeah, because we brought in, today, billions of people believe in the idea of one God, a deterministic view of history, that it's leading to a destination, one standard of absolute morality. The 10 Commandments is on the doors of the United States Supreme Court. But that was a radical idea. In the ancient world, there's no secular. Everyone is religious, but all religions are polytheistic. Along come the Jews with this idea, no, you're all wrong. Judaism is history's most politically incorrect idea. Literally for 2,000 years, the Jews were saying to the rest of the world, you're wrong. There's only one God and one standard of morality. There's no Zeus and this and that and that and that and that and that. And that's what God wants, a relationship with the entire human race. The Jewish people's job is to be the connector, not by converting. It's very hard to convert to Judaism, actually, make it very hard. And not by conquering. The only Jewish empire in history has been Hollywood, and it hasn't been a source of Jewish values. It's by living and acting in a way that inspires people. I always say, there's a famous expression everyone knows, imitation is the highest form of flattery.
Sure.
That's the shortest class you ever got on liberal democracy and Christianity. But that's a very long process, how we managed to get the world that has hated our guts more intensely than any other people on the planet to buy into our worldview is a fantastic subplot of all of human history.
All right, so I know we're not up to that part of the subplot yet, but I'm very interested in that, because it's hard to imagine that jump when we think back on history of everyone being angry at us or persecuting us and those kind of things, then being also like taking notes and being like, okay, let's do what they're doing, and what that even means. What is it that we're doing that they're copying? But I guess we have to get to that in a second. Okay, so all right. So you were about to say they decide it's time for a king.
Right. So we get Saul.
Saul's the first, right?
Saul doesn't have what it takes. He's a great man, but he's too weak. You got to be. So along comes David, who's not from Saul's family. David is from the tribe of Judah. He's from a specific family, and that is the family of kingship. There's a royal bloodline. The tribe of Judah from the family of David, it's called Beit David, like the House of Windsor is the royal family of England of today. This is called Beit David, the House of David. He is the first of a long line of kings, and this begins the period of time. We actually have it with Saul, what's called the unified monarchy. or the first Jewish commonwealth. But David will rule as king for about 7.5 years of just Judah, his own tribe, and then the whole Jewish people will come and ask him, be king over all of us. You got the right stuff. He's an amazing human being. He's a tremendous leader. He's spiritually connected. He's a prophet. He's a musician. He's a poet. He's Plato's philosopher king. And he will rule the Jewish people in total for 40 years. David decides, by the way, this entire period of time, Jerusalem, which is not called Jerusalem in the 5 books of Moses anywhere. It's called Shalem, Salem, whatever. But once we get to Joshua, and it's called Jerusalem, Yerushalayim, and then it's mentioned 669 times in the Hebrew Bible.
Wow.
David says, now that we have a king from whom all future kings will come, including ultimately the Messiah, the messianic concept comes from Judaism. Now we need a capital city. And we picked Jerusalem not because of its location, it should be near water, like Tel Aviv, but because of the spiritual connection of the site with the binding of Isaac story in the beginning of Genesis, where God tells Abraham, take your son and offer him on the spot, which is the natural spot of connectivity. It's kind of the nexus between this metaphysical and the physical world. So David will conquer the city of Jerusalem, which had remained a Canaanite city for 440 years. It's like leaving the British in Georgetown since 1776 for 440 years. And David establishes the Jewish capital there. He rules a unified monarchy, but he's suppressing all the enemies around us. The Middle East has never been a fun place.
Sure.
It's the cradle of civilization, but all the great empires, geographically, and geography plays a big role in history. Israel's in a great location geographically. It's on the Mediterranean, the Eastern Mediterranean, very important. It's also the land bridge between Africa and Asia, which is a blessing and a curse. The blessing is if we're supposed to be the nation that's impacting the world, we're right in the middle of the earliest civilizations. Egypt in the south and Mesopotamia, which is the Greek word for the land between the two rivers, which is the Assyrian civilization, the Babylonians, the Persians. We're right in the middle to influence them, but it's kind of like my joke definition of Belgium, the country used by Germany to invade France. Everyone's fighting battles on our turf. So David is suppressing all the enemies around us. When he wants to build, when we were in Egypt, we were in the desert at Mount Sinai, God tells us to build this thing called the Mishkan, the tabernacle, which is this prefabricated structure, courtyard with 2 rooms. It's a tent with different objects we're not going to go into, but the inner room was the Holy of Holies, which had that Ark of the Covenant, that wooden box gilded in gold with the 10 Commandments inside it that you can see on the Raiders of the Lost Ark movie. This was like the power supply, the antenna for spirituality, which was a prefabricated structure, 40 years in the desert, broke it down, slept it around. 400 years plus in Israel. It was in 4 different locations, in Gilgal, in Shiloh for 369 years, in Nob, and then in Givon. And then David brings the ark to Jerusalem after he conquers the city. He wants to build a permanent version of the Mishkan, this tabernacle, on the spot where the binding of Isaac story took place, the top of that little hill called Mount Moriah. God says you can't do it. Interesting discussion, not to go into now. He says that's the work of my son, Solomon. Solomon succeeds him, and Solomon is the zenith of Jewish history. He inherits a united monarchy where all of our enemies are basically suppressed, either subjugated or at peace with us. And he embarks on a 7-year project to build the temple in Jerusalem, which is also in Hebrew called the Beit HaMikdash. And this is that period of time, which is a 410-year period when that building stands, which is called the first Jewish Commonwealth, interchangeably. And we have independence, but unfortunately after Solomon, I don't know how far you want to go into this without taking a break, but when he dies, Israel will split into 2 countries, like America in the Civil War. But it is a period of time when there is an independent Jewish state.
You talked about creating the temple in this space in Jerusalem. Is it clear that God always wanted it to be there, or is it something that David chose? How would you describe that?
Like I said, it doesn't say specifically when the binding of Isaac story. It says Eretz HaMoriah, the land of Moriah.
Right.
And the hill today is called Mount HaMoriah, the Mount of Mount Moriah. Jewish traditions always said that is the spot. So King David is not randomly picking it. It's very clear from how we understand it that Jewish tradition indicates this is the spot. People always ask me, why did David pick the spot? I said he didn't. God picks the spot.
What are some what do we have evidence of?
That's, first of all, I'm not an archaeologist by profession, but I do work in archaeology. I worked for 5 years digging in the city of David as a volunteer. There are hundreds of millions of pieces of archaeology on some level connected, like even little pieces of pottery from that period of time. I always find it quite humorous when like you have so-called Palestinian archaeologists saying 100 years of digging in Israel have never revealed anything that shows there was a Jewish presence in Israel before Zionism, which is complete nonsense.
Right.
I personally dug out of the ground in the city of David broken pots destroyed when the city was destroyed by the Babylonians, giant storage, amphorae, on which the handles had the seal of the king. It was the king's private wine collection, which we scanned and found later that had vanilla wine, which is very high-end vanilla. So we have the Temple Mount itself has never been properly excavated because it's too politically contentious a site. There have been a little bit of excavation, a lot of illegal digging there done, but there's so much stuff. And we find up north in Tel Dan in 1982, which is all the way up north, they found it upside down in secondary use, like a piece of broken inscription stuck in a wall built later. It talks about Beit David, the house of David.
Beautiful.
So we have direct, the further back we go, the harder it is to find direct evidence. Like we don't find Abraham's, credit card or his iPad, that kind of stuff. But the historicity, which is a fancy word for saying the reality, these are not stories.
Right.
We don't have any direct evidence for, let's say, Abraham, but we have direct evidence for people coming after that, to the point where you get the clay seals of the later kings of Israel.
Got it.
Like we have literally found by Elat Mazar, going back more than a decade ago, she found the seal of Hezekiah the king, who's one of the great, 14th king after King David, one of the greatest kings of Israel, and his prophet advisor is the best known of all the prophets, Isaiah. And they found their seals together. Isaiah's is chipped. These are little clay seals that had their signets on it for sealing documents. And it seems to say Yeshayahu Hanavi, which is wild. Isaiah the prophet. It seems to be that his business seal was Isaiah the prophet.
Or an imitator, I guess. All right, so the furthest back that we have, like, the civilization we know for sure existed, but the furthest back we have of evidence that reference the Jewish people in some way is David. Is that correct?
No, we have going back to the Merneptah stele, Steele, which is, Merneptah was an Egyptian pharaoh after Ramses, who might be the pharaoh of the Exodus. A stele is a large, like an obelisk kind of inscribed. It talks about his military campaign into what is east of him, to Canaan. And he writes, Israel is a widow, her seed is no more. Now what that means, seed, her crops, meaning she's destroyed, which is funny because the ancient Egyptians are gone and we're still here. But it's a clear reference to Israel, which is wild. That's already there. I happen to know someone who's the world's most obsessed person on the Exodus narrative, and he seems to have a massive amount of evidence of the Exodus narrative and the splitting of the sea, which could be. It seems like it's pretty close, but that's a really interesting topic.
All right, beautiful. All right, now take us. All right, so Solomon builds the temple. Give us 2 cents on what we actually know historically about the temple, right? Like priests working there. What do we know about the actual temple itself?
Right. So that it's very clearly a good chunk of the books of the Bible. Once you get into Genesis, Exodus, the first 2 books are all the drama. After we leave Egypt, and especially the book of Leviticus, is hyper obsessed on the priestly laws. The building of the temple, which, by the way, to live as a Jew, you need the oral law. The one thing you don't need the oral law for is the building of this tabernacle, because the details are so specific. It shows us how important this object is, even though we haven't had it for over 2,000 years. But you have the Jewish people are divided by tribes. There's a tribe called from Levi, one of the sons of Jacob, and they're the Levites. The Levites are kind of like the custodians of the temple, and there's a subgroup of Levites who are descended from Moses' brother Aaron, who are designated as priests, Kohanim. Even today, the name Cohen comes from priest. Kagan, Khan, Katz, Rappaport. Oh, you're a Cohen. Interesting. Okay.
Our family name is Pinchas, basically.
Okay. So there's Aaron's son, Pinchas. Okay. So this is a family whose primary job it was to work in the temple. What is done in the tabernacle and then the temple, because it's the same structure, just different locations, is there is a whole series of rituals that were done. Much of it involves animal sacrifice and offerings, not just of animals, of meal, flour. There was bread, incense, all these different things. It's very, very, very technical.
And that level of detail, do we have, it seems like the books, at least my understanding, in the Tanakh, they're more focused on the wars happening and less on what was actually happening in the tabernacle. Do we have evidence of all those things happening as well, either through history or like finding things that were used in the temple? At the
Yeah,
time?
there's by the time we get to the Second Temple period in the Mishnah, which is the codification of the oral law we're going back 2,200 years ago, up to 2000. Second Temple period, there's lots of evidence, because once the Greeks and the Romans come along, the bigger problem with this, Justin, is that this is all prehistoric. I don't mean dinosaurs. We think history always exists, and that history is always for the objective recording of events.
Right.
Both those things are not true.
Of course.
History often was used to illustrate a specific point, and often no history is completely. There's a great line: "Not even God can change history; only historians can."
Right. And there's a great book that like basically retells the David story through the eyes of Saul, like like that.
Yeah.
It was written as the David side, not the Saul side. Even that within the Jewish people, you can imagine. Wait a second, maybe Saul wasn't who we thought he was, because
exactly. You read the Book of Chronicles, and it's paralleling the First Temple period. You could see the differences in understanding, written by different authors at different periods of time. But I just lost my train of thought. Remind me what we were talking
Let me
about.
ask you. Let me back you up a second, because you were getting into the Second Temple. So give us the high level. The First Temple is destroyed. What you said there was already discontent and fighting among the pieces of the nation. What happens? How does the First Temple get destroyed? Then let's go from there.
Right. So after the death of King Solomon, his son Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, he doesn't have the right stuff. And he will cause a split in the Jewish people into two separate kingdoms. You have basically the tribe of Judah in the south, which is the largest geographic area of Israel. And then you have basically more or less 10 tribes in the north. The northern kingdom is called Israel, and the southern kingdom is called Judah. The southern kingdom has 20 kings from the bloodline of King David. It will go till 586 BCE, basically. The northern kingdom will have 20 kings also, but none of them are David's bloodline. And it will cease to exist more than 130 years before the destruction of the southern kingdom. It's kind of like America in the Civil War from 1861 to 1865. It's a divided nation that even fight with each other, make alliances. That's the whole book of Kings, is this. And the kings of Judah, some of whom are very, very righteous, like Hezekiah, who I mentioned previously. Some of them who are not good. Some of them are terrible, like Hezekiah's son Manasseh, who's the worst of all of them. The kings of the north are only bad and worse. And since our ability to prosper and stay in the land is contingent on our keeping the relationship with God and with each other, as this deteriorates because of bad leadership, top down, so too the most common we see in the Bible signs of God's displeasure with us are drought and famine. They come together usually, and external threats against the Jewish people, being invaded by foreigners, little by little nibbling it away, or just complete conquest and destruction. Because we Jews believe that it's called His story for a reason. God runs the show, and while there's a direct geopolitical cause for everything, whether it's what happened October 7th with Gaza, or the Holocaust, or destruction of the First Temple, or destruction of the Second Temple, on a deeper level, there's always a deeper spiritual, moral cause that's behind the scenes. And as those relationships dissolve or start to fall apart, we start to lose autonomy in our own country. The northern kingdom first. The Babylonians make a reappearance as a major power, and they nibble away at that northern kingdom. The Assyrians first, start nibbling away at the northern kingdom. And the Assyrians will basically destroy the northern kingdom and carry away the entire population that hasn't already been carried away through previous invasions into exile, which means the whole northern part of Israel becomes denuded of its Jewish population. That's the famous 10 lost tribes.
Right.
A huge chunk of the Jewish people, gone.
Right.
There are millions and millions of people today who are descended from these people who are no longer identifiable as Jews. It's one of the great mysteries. The southern kingdom will survive for more than 100 years after that, but also goes into a state of decline. The Assyrian Empire is replaced by the Babylonian Empire in the same more or less geographic area of Iraq. And when we go back to 2,500 years ago, bad leadership amongst the kings of Judah, the descendants of King David, this is during the time of the prophet Jeremiah, who's warning, listen to God. It's very interesting what he says, because he's speaking to us today. He says, stop obsessing on the temple. Worry about the poor, the downtrodden. Be balanced, okay? And don't and submit to Babylon. Because if they're oppressing you, it's because I'm sending them. Right. Okay. And we don't listen. And eventually, the last king, Zedekiah, rebels. It's a feudal relationship. He's a vassal state. he says, no, not paying taxes to you anymore. The Babylonians invade Judah. And after a 2.5-year siege, Jerusalem falls, massive famine. You could read the book of Lamentations as Jeremiah's prophetic description of what will happen. It's the end of the book of Kings, which means this is after 830 years we've been in the land between Joshua, Judges, and the entire first Commonwealth period. It all comes to an end. Jerusalem is destroyed, the temple's destroyed, and the survivors of Judah are taken to captivity in Babylon for 70 years, a la the prophecy of Jeremiah. That's that song that I know that Bob Marley sang and Don McLean, by the rivers of Babylon we sat down and wept. Yeah. This is one of the Psalms. And this is tremendous. We didn't know what it meant to live. How can we live in diaspora?
Yeah.
It's not possible.
All right, so before we continue from being sent away for 70 years, I just want to make sure I caught it all. So you said it was 800 and something years? 830
years.
Okay, that they were in...
440 years, Joshua, Judges, and 410 years of what's called the First Commonwealth.
Great, so 850. So we have 850 years, and within that, we have, in some ways, I guess, let's call it the first Holocaust. Like, do you have a sense of the numbers of, like, when the tribes of Israel disappear? Like, how big were we as a population then, and how much was taken away? Is there a guess for that?
There's biblical numbers given for how many Jews. Whether those numbers are supposed to be taken literally and are literal.
Right.
We're not talking about tens of millions of people. We're talking about a world population that's much smaller. So the entire Jewish population of the world could be a couple of million people, and they're all living in the land of Israel. But the exact numbers we really don't know.
And we think like half of that, or more than half?
Well, if the 10 tribes, clearly the vast majority of the Jewish people are not the tribe of Judah.
Right.
So, I mean, we take our name, Yehudi, Jew in Hebrew is Yehudi, comes, not they're all from Judah, by the way.
Yeah.
But the majority of Jews probably are. But you you're from the tribe of, you're a Cohen, from the tribe of the Levites.
And they, of course, were not the ones who got expelled. It was really like the other.
Well, we get expelled. The northern kingdom.
We're not the ones that disappeared.
The northern kingdom goes.
Had Levites in it also, right?
Yeah, there was scattered throughout, and Kohanim also, and not necessarily all the Jews. And some of those 10 tribes certainly fled south. We see that, by the way, in the archaeology, that right around the time of the destruction of the northern kingdom, we see the expansion of the city of Jerusalem, probably because of the mass number of refugees fleeing south to escape the Assyrian onslaught. So they're living outside the walls, and they had to expand the city and build bigger walls.
Got it. So that was the first, I guess, let's call it major, like, attack on the Jewish population as is. I guess, the other one that comes to mind for me is, I don't know from a historical perspective, but like Egypt, there's always kind of like this description of when the Jews went out into Egypt, like they reached the 49th level of impurity, that kind of thing. So is there a sense that we also lost a big chunk of our population there?
Well, there is such a rabbinic interpretation that 4/5 of the Jews didn't leave Egypt.
Got it.
Now, personally, I'm a rabbi and historian. I like to be very rational. If they estimate that 3 million Jews left Egypt, which again may not be a literal number, we say 600,000 men, and they extrapolate, and if 4/5, do the math. Right. We're taking this 15 million Jews. There was no way there was 15 million Jews in Egypt. Right. I mean, the population of Egypt was nowhere near that. The entire population of Egypt was not that big. So we have to distinguish between what is being, the Bible is, this is a whole big discussion of what is literal, what's not. The people are real, the events are basically real, but there's numbers and stories. Sometimes, especially the earlier back we go, we have to be careful how we interpret that. But I look at it, by the way, as Egypt is a micro version of all of Jewish history. From the high to the low to the high again, the Exodus narrative, returning to Israel, is kind of the messianic idea of reaching the ideal. So too when we get to the end of history, just as only a fraction of the Jews will be there at the end. By the way, demographers estimate that given the number of Jews living, we're getting ahead of ourselves in the Second Temple period, there should be minimum of 250 million Jews in the world, and as many as 750 million Jews.
Wow.
The fact that there are maybe 15 million Jews in the world means that if everyone is Jewish, there are hundreds of non-Jews with Jewish blood. Hundreds. In South and Central America, it's estimated there are 200 million people of Jewish ancestry.
Okay, so you'll explain to us how those people continue to peel off. But we lost some in Egypt, or big chunks in Egypt, and some during the First Commonwealth. And just while we're talking about Egypt, you mentioned kind of the story of an Egyptian ruler talking about attacking Israel, as presumably once the Jews were gone. Right. Is there any evidence of, you mentioned you have a friend who's been investigating this also, like, I don't know, did we build the pyramids?
The standard chronology puts the pyramids way, way before the Jewish people.
Got it.
Like way before. The pyramids are an amazing structure.
Yeah.
How they built them. Tallest man-made structure on the planet Earth for 43 centuries until the Eiffel Tower was built.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. But no, the Jewish tradition doesn't have. It says we built Pitom for Ramses. This is why Ramses II of the New Kingdom is often associated as the Pharaoh of the Exodus, because it says we built a city named after him. But it remains a big debate amongst Egyptologists and Bible scholars and those who try and jump between the two.
Got it. And is there evidence of the Jewish people being in Egypt?
There is some evidence, but not 100% clear cut. And again, I'll put you in touch with this person if you want. You can try and get him on your show.
We'll have him
fascinating.
for Passover next year.
I don't know if he'll do it, but it would be really interesting.
Okay, and he's building his case for...
He's been doing it for decades.
Us in Egypt and the splitting of the sea. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
All right, so we've had these kind of two major moments where groups of Jews were clawed away. And the thread that you kind of see, I hear you saying several times, is the idea that we do what's right, let's say, in some way. We go to the high of the high, and then we go to the low of the low, and that kind of wakes us back up. And then some percentage of us manage to stay in the fold and keep the story moving forward.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
All right, fine. So first temple's destroyed. Jews are exiled to Babylonia, 70 years. Jeremiah predicted it, like you said. He says to give in, which is also a super weird thing in modern times where like the Jewish people need to be able to defend themselves. And he's like, don't fight back. Listen, go to Babylon. Okay, then what happens?
So we go to Babylon, which is the first diaspora, which is the Greek word for scattering. Here we're not scattered. I mean, certainly some Jews run off to escape the Babylonians, different places, back to Egypt, some of them go, and things like that. There's some traditions of different places. We talk about Jerba, and in Egypt we find evidence of Jewish communities that may go back that far, not sure. But the majority of Jews that survive as Jews, the tribe of Judah, will go to what is today Iraq for 70 years. The Babylonian Empire.
Back to Iraq. That's
back to Iraq. Back to where we started from.
Fascinating.
And the Babylonian Empire, will fall to the Persian Empire. So we find ourselves in the Persian Empire. We also have to keep in mind, though, that at this time, this is one thing people don't understand. They're not divergent versions of Judaism at this period of time. Judaism has evolved. The trunk of Judaism we call today orthodoxy, which is not really a word invented by traditional Jews. The idea orthodox was a label, we're jumping way ahead, created by the Reform movement in the 19th century to label observant Jews as being backward and ossified. But Torah observant Jews who kept the 613 commandments is the trunk. That has evolved tremendously. By the way, much to the shock of a lot of very observant Jews.
Sure.
Thinking that Jews walked around with big fur hats and long wool coats 2,000 years ago. Not true.
Right. Actually, that's what I was trying to get at a little before with the question about the temple, is like trying to understand, the actual Tanakh, the Bible doesn't spend that much time talking about the average person going to pray or doing whatever they did at the temple. But I assume that was our existence then. It was an element of, we brought sacrifices 3 times a year, and Jerusalem was the center of the thing. There were no synagogues, obviously.
Right.
There was not.
Right.
It looked very different than today.
Right. In Israel, in the first temple period, we have complete unanimity of political leadership, aside from what we talked about before, the splitting, and unity of spiritual leadership. And the Jewish governmental system, which, by the way, became the model for the American government in 1776, is chief political leader, king, chief religious leader, the high priest, the Kohen Gadol.
Wait, go slower. I can't keep up. Chief political leader, king.
The king.
Yeah.
Chief religious leader is the Kohen Gadol. That's a separation, not of church and state, because Jewish law covers everything, temporal and spiritual law, but rather that the king is not the high priest, like Pharaoh is the high priest of Egypt. And the judicial legislative body, which would be the equivalent of the Congress, the Senate, and the Supreme Court rolled into one that adjudicate and legislate, is called the Sanhedrin.
Right.
And the Sanhedrin was the ultimate legal authority in everything related to whether it was laws of property, damages, laws of Jewish dietary laws, or Sabbath observance. Like the Supreme Court, you can go through local courts too.
And they were rabbis.
These were the 71
or elders,
best guys.
Rabbis.
These were. The word is out of my brain. When a person who's the most, the person who's best suited for the job gets the job. A meritocracy. Okay. It was a meritocracy. You didn't have to come from money or power. The best suited people, recognized as such, would elevate themselves, would end up elevated to the highest level of sitting in the Sanhedrin. So there's no offshoots of Judaism. There's no Sadducees, there's no Karaites, there's no Reform, there's no Conservative, there's no Reconstruct. These are all things that appear later.
Sure.
And that goes to Babylon.
And sorry, just to clarify, though, that meritocracy, that's like the earliest versions of rabbis, or they were sages, or what did we think
Right,
of
so
them
the
as?
term rabbi, originally, Moses was the first rabbi.
Right.
Means teacher.
Right.
And what are they teaching?
Yeah.
They're teaching Moses gets the Torah from God. Read the beginning of the Ethics of the Fathers in the Mishnah. Moses got the Torah from Mount Sinai and gave it to Joshua, and Joshua gave it to the elders. That's the other term. This is Kenim. The Sanhedrin is a Greek word. They gave it to the prophets. The prophets gave it goes through the whole chain of what's called the Shalshelet HaKabbalah, the chain of transmission. When you open a Talmud today, or you look at a modern halachic book, it's basically an ongoing discussion that began at Mount Sinai and is being discussed based on certain immutable principles that never change, but have been adapted to deal with the changing geopolitical realities of the Jewish people and changing technology and the situation of the Jews in the world. But the principle, you're a lawyer, I know, so American law is based on precedent, like Jewish law is based on principle. So that's the whole, so this was...
Wait, explain that phrase, come on. What do you mean, precedent versus
Precedent,
principle?
you can have the court will decide that this is legal, and then it can decide a few years later, Supreme Court, that's not legal, or this was illegal, now it's legal. Whereas Jewish law, what's right is right, what is wrong, is always absolute, but how it's applied is the divine is in the details.
Got it.
Is okay, what does that mean? You have a principle, value of life. What does that mean? In terms of saving a life, in terms of a sick person, in terms of a death penalty, in terms of... But the principles are there, you just have to apply them.
There's new cases, but the principles don't change.
Exactly.
Okay, all right, fine. All right, so I thank you for the little digression there. So we're somewhat uniform. We go back to Iraq. You said the Persians took over from the Babylonians.
Right. And Cyrus, the Persians, he goes, you can go back to Israel. God promised through Jeremiah, I won't forget about you. One of the most basic promises God says is, no matter how much you blow it, you will always survive.
Okay.
How many, how easily, how quickly, it's up to you guys, but you'll make it. So we go back, and this is the beginning of the Second Temple period. We return. Initially, by the way, a lot of Jews don't want to return. It's like 1948. Israel's a desert wasteland surrounded by hostile Arab states with no infrastructure, rationing everything in a constant state of warfare and terrorism. Most Jews are like today when Messiah comes, Jews in Lakewood and Williamsburg and Pico Robertson and, hey, it's nice here. I go to Israel. We got missiles from the Houthi. We got all these people like next to who hate our guts. I'll stay here. Never works that way. There's only two kinds of Jews, by the way. This is one of the great patterns established. Those who live in Israel and those who will be living in Israel. There is no long-term future for Jews in diaspora. And that's why when we get too comfortable in one place, like Jews in Germany, Jews in Spain, Jews in Egypt, over and over, something will happen that shakes us up and throws us out to another place until we end up back where we're supposed to be, is in the land of Israel. This is a fundamental understanding of Jewish worldview. So Jews
as you've reflected in your choices by moving to Israel in 1982.
Exactly.
Okay.
I came for 3 months.
And
that's 43 years later. So Jews come back, and as the temple is rebuilt, a cheap fixer-upper version, Solomon spent 7 years making this beautiful building. But as a stable presence is established, under Persian hegemony originally, Jews will start to move back, and the population will grow, and Jerusalem will start to expand. But then who comes along? The first empire of Europe that invades the Middle East, Alexander the Great.
But pause. You say the word Persian. Is Purim happening somewhere here?
Yeah, excuse me. The holiday of Purim happens right at this period of time of the return of the Jews. As a matter of fact, Jewish tradition says the reconstruction of the Second Temple is halted for 18 years because the Jews are badmouthed by their neighbors to the Persians. If you let them rebuild this building, they're going to rebel against you. It's after the miracle of Persia and King Ahasuerus and his queen Esther and that narrative that the temple is finally finished.
Got it. So that's
70 years after it was destroyed.
And just place, I know we're not doing a session on Purim here, but place that for me briefly as well. So the Persia story, the Purim story happens in Persia, which is Iraq also?
Which is the area. Well, Persia is actually in Iran today.
Okay.
Like there's a tomb of Mordechai and Esther in what's called Hamadan.
Right.
Which is Shushan.
Okay. So now we're in Iran, and there's this moment of there are all these midrashim that Ahasuerus had the kalim, how do you say it, the vessels from the temple, that kind of thing. There's an idea that like, and there's also like, people have said they all have these Persian names, so they all like were assimilated. This also fits into your narrative a little bit.
Yeah, and by the way, assimilation doesn't necessarily mean that they were giving up their Judaism.
Right.
Assimilation means that great feast, which is the beginning of the story.
Yeah.
The Jewish tradition says he's kosher catering for all his Jewish guests.
Right.
It's like you have a dinner at the White House. I know people have gone there.
Yeah.
They bring kosher food for you, and everyone else has the regular meal.
Right.
So it doesn't necessarily mean they're giving up their Judaism.
Okay.
It means they're getting too comfortable.
Right.
70 years is 3 generations of growing up there. They forgot the old country.
Got it. Okay, so there's that. So that's another example of them being comfortable in another place, and then they have this moment of threat on them. In this case, they don't lose the whole population; they actually survive and are successful. And how does that lead to them going back? What's the connection? Is there a connection?
Well, again, it's against Cyrus, who's the leader after the Babylonians are gone. Tells it. It's a famous seal. It's a.
But Cyrus is before or after Ahasuerus?
Cyrus is before.
Okay.
He's before. He's after the fall of the Babylonians.
So the Purim story happens when people are allowed to go back to Israel?
Yeah, that's when the temple's frozen at that period of time. And the Cyrus has that famous cylinder. We have a copy of it. It doesn't mention the Jews on that one, but it's in the British Museum, a cuneiform. It's like making wedge-shaped marks into clay, which is the ancient Semitic language that people wrote in back then, where he basically does describe telling everyone to go home. Mm-hmm. The Babylonian thing was bring everyone to Babylon, make it like the center. He's saying go back to where you came from.
For all nations.
Yeah, so it says 42,000 Jews go back under Zerubbabel, who is the Reish Galusa. He was the head of the Jewish community in diaspora, direct descendant of King David. Mm-hmm. But that's only a tiny fraction. I personally estimate it's about like 5% of the Jewish world is living at the beginning of the Second Temple period, which, by the way, works perfectly. Post-Holocaust, 11 million Jews and the 600,000 in Israel, same 5%.
Wow.
So that's only going back, less than 80 years ago. So you see the pattern repeats itself again. Only a few want to go back, and the situation's difficult. But as things are reestablished, it picks up, and people start to pour in.
Okay.
But then Alexander the Great, the whole story of the Greeks is fascinating. Alexander the Great embarks on, in my opinion, the greatest military campaign of all of human history, where he takes 45,000 men on a 10-year campaign. He dismembers the Persian Empire. Unbelievable. He fights armies 10 times his size. Go read about Granicus, Issus, and Galgamela in the 4th century BCE. Unbelievable battles. And he does a detour down through what is today Lebanon. When you mentioned Iraq and Lebanon, these countries don't exist back then. Mm-hmm. These are modern creations of the British and the French in the beginning of the 20th century. But what is today Lebanon, he takes the city of Tyre, and then he comes down to Jerusalem to destroy it, actually. And he doesn't. I don't want to go into too much detail. He's one of the only people to peacefully absorb. He makes it all the way to Egypt and ends in the independent Egypt. Mm-hmm. All the people named Cleopatra are Greeks, by the way. And he conquers Jerusalem and Israel, and would become part of the Greek Empire. And this is the beginning of the Second Temple period. And the difference between the First and Second Temple period is there are no kings. There are no legitimate kings. There's a few descendants of this guy Herod. This Herod the Great, the famous Herod who built Masada and rebuilt Jerusalem, and some of his descendants. Herod Agrippus I, Herod Agrippus II. So the kingship thing is gone. The Jewish government has kind of fallen apart. The temple's reestablished, so there is priesthood, but because of the Greek influence, and this is something we can't go into detail, this is the beginning of schism in the Jewish world. When you have splinter sects, groups of Jews influenced by foreign thought. The first are called the Sadducees, the Sadducees, who are very heavily embedded in the priesthood of Israel. So you have schism of breakaway. And you do have the Sanhedrin. And we see the big switch in Judaism is as the kingship no longer exists and the priesthood becomes corrupted and the temple eventually be destroyed, rabbis will expand their authority to fill up the gap, which is why what's called rabbinic Judaism of today is not the original normative Judaism with kingship and priesthood and the Sanhedrin. Now it's the tree trunk of orthodoxy, of Torah-observant Judaism, has now evolved to deal with the changing political realities and leadership realities of the Jewish people. But this period of 420 years, not to spend a lot of time going through it, we have the Greeks come in 333 BCE, Alexander the Great. He dies in 323, at the age of 32. He dies, very young. His empire splits into different chunks, and Israel's right in the middle. And that's when the story of Hanukkah takes place. When we are part of the Greek Empire to the east, called the Assyrian Greek Empire, The leader, whose name is Antiochus, led on by a bunch of assimilationist Jews, which is an interesting topic. Few things are worse than Jews trying to out-Gentile Gentiles and being Gentile.
Yeah.
Sometimes the biggest self-hating, biggest enemies are these people.
It's hard to imagine that today.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine, impossible. They will sick the Greeks on not Jews but Judaism.
Yeah.
This is about 2,200 years ago, in what is known as history's first religious ideological war.
Right.
The
Yeah.
Greeks-
Unpack that phrase. You're saying they're sending the Greeks to not go after Jews but Judaism. Explain
Right. They're not trying to kill Jews. Not the Holocaust. This
Right.
is a spiritual war.
Yeah.
This is called the Shmad in Jewish law.
Yeah.
They're trying to get Jews to give up Judaism. And what keeps Jews Jewish is only one thing. This is not debatable at all. Not even what keeps Jews Jewish is Jews keeping Judaism. This is totally not debatable. When Jews live and learn as Jews, meaning keeping Jewish lifestyle and learning about the Torah, as we say, that's what keeps Jews Jewish. Undermine that. See, a lot of people think Jews can't survive without kosher Chinese food. Jews love sushi. Jews can't survive without deli.
Yeah.
Now, boy, Jews can't survive without Judaism. So they're trying to destroy not Jews. Had the Jews assimilated, the Greeks would have been happy. The Holocaust was different. Hitler's saying the most dangerous Jews are the ones who are assimilating. And they were trying to assimilate in Germany.
Right.
This is the opposite. That's the Hanukkah story. When a small family of priests, could be your great-grandparents, we don't know, lead a guerrilla war, which is going to be on and off for 25 years, the Hanukkah story. When we basically fight the Greeks to a period of time when they give up. We're okay, fine. You're independent again.
Sure.
We have about a century of Jewish independence. This is taking us to around the year 63 BCE, because the next great world power that's now appeared in the West, this is parallel, because when you learn Jewish history, you learn the history of everyone else. You go through Egypt, you go through Persia, Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome. The Roman Empire has already appeared as a major world power. By the 2nd century before the Common Era, Rome is already a superpower. It's already gobbled up Greece at the time of the Hanukkah story.
Let me ask you, one quick thing on that. You mentioned we kind of go along with history. One thing that always struck me is, of course, Eastern history. That's not the case, right? We have this whole separate long thing happening with China and all that stuff. There's no interaction at all yet. That's just its own massive thing.
Not yet.
But let's call it Western history. Is really we go along with each piece. Okay, keep going.
Yeah. We're talking about exactly. Yeah. So in the year 63 BC, before the Common Era, Pompey Magnus, who at the time is co-ruling with Julius Caesar, the famous Julius Caesar. This is when Rome is transforming from republic to a totalitarian dictatorship run by Caesars. He will come to the land of Israel, ostensibly to mediate a dispute between two descendants of Judah Maccabee and his family, the Maccabean family, over who's going to rule. We're fighting amongst each other.
Again, in that case, in the role as priest or in the role as king.
They become the Maccabees. We didn't really go into the Hanukkah story in detail, but they become not just the high priest, but exilarch. It's like almost a king. They took too much power upon themselves. They didn't have right.
Consolidate those two pieces.
They didn't have right to do that. And the famous quote from Lord Acton: "Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely."
So the Hanukkah heroes within a couple generations
they become exactly that which their ancestors gave their lives to get rid of, which is they become Greekified. Which is why their names, their grandparents, their great-grandparents are named Judah and Eliezer and things like that, and they're named Hyrcanus and Aristobulus.
Wow. Okay.
And the priesthood is all corrupted, by the way.
Sure.
So it's bought and sold.
Right.
It's kind of like the papacy.
Right.
If you read about the 13th, 14th centuries, the papacies. And this, by the way, it is a separate, totally not our topic, but at one point in the 14th century, there's a pope in Avignon, France, and a pope in Rome. Same thing. Jews go off to Egypt and found a second temple there. Priests don't like what happened in Jerusalem, and they're upset they didn't get chosen, so they go off to Egypt, to a place called Leonopolis. Really? Yeah, there's an Elephantine. They go out to the Nile.
Second temple?
There's a second temple which will exist for a very long time till the Romans destroy it.
Wait, what, in Egypt?
Yeah, in Egypt. They build another second temple, yes.
Wow.
It's called Leontopolis. And it could be founded by a guy who was a priest during the time of the Maccabees who got bypassed to become the high priest. I guess his cousin or his brother paid more money than he did to get the office.
So he goes to Egypt.
Yeah, but they're all corrupted. A lot of them had said...
Is that one also destroyed on Tisha B'Av?
Not on Tisha B'Av.
Okay.
It is destroyed, but the Romans destroy everything.
Fine. All right, so keep going.
So the Romans come...
What did you say?
Pompey. He's killed in Egypt later. Caesar emerges then. What happens is then, this is when Herod the Great appears as a Jewish... Not a descendant of King David, not of Jewish ancestry, but appointed by Octavian, who later becomes Augustus, the first great Roman Caesar. Okay. This is the height of Pax Romana, Roman expansion, where the entire Mediterranean becomes a Roman sea.
Okay.
And this is in the middle of what's called the Second Temple period. Herod will be appointed king. He will rule from 37 to 4 BCE. He is a very dangerous guy. He kills everyone, including many members of his own family. But he's also one of the greatest builders in human history. He builds the city of Caesarea, this artificial port. He builds Masada. He builds everywhere, temples, palaces. He rebuilds the temple in Jerusalem, not because he was loyal. He was descendant of converts to Judaism. He was really a pagan at heart. But to ingratiate himself with the Jewish people who hated him, because he killed so many of them, he spends a huge amount of money building this gorgeous building, of which that western wall of today is not part of the temple, but the retaining wall that's built around the platform.
Right, the western wall is the retaining wall,
right.
that's what we have left. And just to be clear, we had said in Persia there was talk of rebuilding the Second Temple. Herod's the one who actually rebuilt.
No, it's rebuilt by the Jews who returned from Babylon, but it's low budget.
Low budget, and then he expands it? Or
He
builds
fixes it up. He levels the building, actually.
He destroys the Second Temple and makes
he
the Second
rebuilds
Temple Part 2.
The Second Temple Part 2, exactly.
Wow, I
he
didn't know
rebuilds
that.
it into a beautiful structure, which was the platform today of what's called Har HaBayit, is the largest platform ever built in the world. It's 480 meters by 300 meters. It's over 500. You can stick 23 football fields up there.
Wow.
It's huge. In the center was the temple. And even the rabbis who hated him said, if you've never seen the house of Herod, they don't mean all of his palaces. You've never seen a house in your life.
God, and that was bigger than Solomon's.
The size, the actual building size is carefully laid out by the Bible in terms of how many feet.
Right. Oh, but the whole.
But the actual how ornamented it was, gold and white and stuff, and it's unbelievable.
So
and the platform
that
it's stood on.
exceeded
And
Solomon's
Jerusalem was twice the size of the old city of today.
Okay.
This is the height of expansion.
Okay.
When Herod dies, the Romans go back to direct rule. We're going through very, very fast. But the Romans and the Jews have a very tumultuously difficult relationship, which will explode in a series of revolts. And concurrent with that is the fact that Jewish people are now split. Because there's no strong leadership, because the rabbis are trying to keep things together. There's no real kingship. The priesthood is corrupted. Everything's kind of fraying at the edges, so there'll be a lot of internal strife. Internal strife in the Jewish world always means there's going to be external stuff happening to us.
Right. I'm going to pause you right there, and we're going to have a cliffhanger. This is the end of part one of this discussion. We're going to come up, we'll pick up from the internal strife after the time of Herod and the time of the Second Temple. Thank you. This has been fascinating. I can't wait to hear what happens next. To be continued. Join us for part two.